Yeah, I see how it is.
There goes, there goes. All right, there's everybody, including myself holding the camera.
All right, so good morning. My name is Brandon James. This morning, we're going to talk a little bit of politics. I'm not going to try to persuade you into any left or right sides, but I'm specifically going to give you a informational brief on a caucus. By show of hands, has anybody ever participated in a caucus? All right.
Oh, yes.
All right, so imagine this scenario. Before you could go and cast your ballot, before you could walk up to a ballot box and put your check for who you thought was the prime candidate. Before you did that, you had to stand in a room, maybe in a forum such as this, maybe a gymnasium, maybe your church, and listen to others give a testimony on why they thought their candidate should be the lead candidate and try to persuade you, and maybe you were given the opportunity to do the same. But before you could do that, you would be required to go through that process before you could go check the ballot. So depending on what state you're from and what state you're registered to vote in, that could be the situation. So this morning we're going to talk about three main topics briefly. The first topic I'm going to define is, I'm going to answer the question, what is a caucus? Second, I'm going to go in and I'm going to briefly compare a caucus versus a primary. And then finally, I'm going to talk about the Iowa caucus briefly. So most of my sources this morning are going to come from CFR.org and IowaGOP.org. So if you got any questions, you can reference back to that. On the table, you'll find a visual aid. If you can take a look at that while I'm going through here, and that'll get in and talk about topic number 3. So once we get to that process, I'm sorry, topic number 2. So once we get to that process, that'll help provide some more information. So first we're going to answer the question, what is a caucus? Well, a caucus is a group of people from the same political party gathering to select their candidate, presidential candidate or any other elected official from their political party, or to discuss and decide political party policy. The Democrats and the Republicans both utilize the caucus process, and the caucus process is controlled by the individual political parties. So the Democrats control their party, or their caucus process, and the Republicans do the same, and they have their own rules that govern. So to help understand a caucus a little bit more, let's compare it to a primary. So a primary versus a caucus. Unlike a caucus, a primary is typically held in a standard polling process, or a standard polling center, and it also when you're casting your ballot, you're generally doing so in a secret type manner, so you don't have to stand up and identify which candidate that you voted for. Primaries are state funded versus the caucus, like I mentioned earlier, is funded by the individual political party. So some of the benefits that states like to take advantage of is with the caucus process is that they're not required to provide any funds for it. So if you got a state that they're trying to conserve their state income or funds for that year, and it's not for that year. This is something that a caucus generally is. The state stays with the caucus process from year to year. They rarely change. So, and finally, primaries tend to have greater voter turnout, and the reason that I believe to be behind this is that because the caucus process takes so long to come in and cast your ballot, you may have other commitments such as work or family. The lengthy process that it takes to caucus usually deters folks from coming in and actually casting the ballot. Whereas a primary, you come in, you check your ballot real quick, and you go drop it in the box, or if you're in the digital age today, you're pressing that button on the screen. So let's talk specifically about the Iowa caucus. So the Iowa caucus is probably one of the most well-known election events because it takes place, it is the first event to take place throughout the election year. So this year, in 2016, the Iowa caucus was held on February 1st. In 1972, the Democrats went through some party reform, and they moved the Iowa caucus to the head of the line as far as when the election process is. So since 1972, Iowa has been the first state to enter the election process, and this is according to IowaGOP.org. In 2016, according to CFR.org, 1,681 precincts in the state of Iowa caucused in nearly 700 locations throughout the state, And the Iowa caucus starts typically at 7 p.m. on the day of the election this year. Again, it happened to be February 1st. Process typically lasts 1 hour, and to give you a little bit of visual representation of how this might work. So if you got candidate A over here and candidate B over here, candidate A folks are going to stand up and they're going to try to persuade folks from candidate B to come over to their side. And when the time's up, however many people's over on candidate A's side versus candidate B, whoever's got the most, that's how the individual is elected and won for that state. Iowa has 99 counties. So in review, I'm going to summarize my 3 talking points. My first talking point was I defined what a caucus was. Secondly, I compared a caucus to a primary, and finally, we talked about the Iowa caucus process. So I would like to take this opportunity to remind each and every one of you to exercise your constitutional right to influence your representation in this great democracy, and you can do that by doing one thing, and that is voting. Thank you.